Hi, I'm Gene Benson, and I want to thank you for watching this video that provides some information on dealing with sleet in a small general aviation airplane. Please note that this video only discusses sleet, which is not a form of structural icing. Just a disclaimer before we begin. First, the information contained in this video is general in nature and may not be representative of all situations relating to sleet and other meteorological phenomena. The scenario presented is intended to represent a small, reciprocating engine-powered general aviation airplane and should not be taken to represent all airplanes in all situations. And finally, it is the responsibility of the pilot in command to be aware of the present and forecast weather for the flight and to make informed decisions based on the actual conditions. All right, we begin. Here's a typical scenario regarding flight in a small GA airplane. We're in cruising flight heading toward our destination. Cloudy night, so we're probably on an IFR flight plan. Maybe we're VFR and trying to stay below the clouds. Suddenly, large shot of adrenaline when we hear this. We have just encountered sleet. It's important to note that sleet is not structural icing. Sleet sounds extremely ominous, but poses little risk to safety of flight. It is not good for the paint, but sleet alone is generally not dangerous. However, there are a couple of recommended precautions. In extreme situations, it could clog the air inlet to the engine, so we should apply carburetor heat or open the alternate air source to bypass the air filter. As we will see very shortly, it is possible to quickly pass through the area of sleet and into an area of freezing rain, which is big-time structural icing, so we should turn on the pitot heat and open the alternate static source just in case. Now remember from ground school that opening the alternate static source will cause some error in the altimeter reading. So let's take a step back and look at the big picture. To have sleet, we must have an area of relatively warm air overriding relatively cold air. If the warm air is producing rain, obviously it will fall into the colder air below. If the relatively colder air is still at a temperature above freezing, the rain simply stays as rain and we continue our flight in the rain. But if the freezing level is low enough to be just above our flight altitude, we might encounter something other than just rain. Going back to that really scary sound we heard when we first encountered the sleet, we have taken precautions against engine airflow blockage, pitot ice, and a static source blockage. But now what should we do? This is what we refer to as rapid decision making. We have a short but manageable amount of time to make a decision. You might remember reading that if the airplane is experiencing structural icing, a climb is the best option because, well, I guess you might climb into warmer air, but at least you will gain some altitude before the ice accretion takes away the ability to climb. But also remember that we just said that sleet is not a form of structural icing. You might also remember that if you suddenly fly into adverse weather, you can usually make a 180-degree turn and just fly back out of it. This is a perfect example of a need for decision making. Rapid decision making is driven by our knowledge and experience. By watching this video, you are strengthening your knowledge base that will aid in your future rapid decision making. So here's more of the story. We've just flown into an area of sleet. The graphic shows a situation that represents typically what is happening meteorologically. Here's our airplane that has just flown into the area of sleet. We have the warm air above the colder air. In other words, we have a temperature inversion. This is quite typical of an approaching warm front. At some point, as we move down into the cold air from the warm air, we will encounter the freezing level. Now, normally we encounter the freezing level as we climb into colder air, but in this case, we are descending into colder air. Once we descend a little bit below the freezing level, or at least once the raindrops descend a little bit below the freezing level, the rain will remain liquid for a bit as it cools toward freezing or until it encounters a cold object, such as an airplane that has been flying in the cold air. This is the most dangerous area to be in. Ice accretion rates in freezing rain can be so severe as to render the airplane unable to maintain altitude in a very short amount of time. As the raindrops continue their fall through the below freezing temperature air, they will begin to freeze into ice particles or, as we said, sleet. Since they do not all freeze at the same time, this level will consist of a mix of freezing rain and sleet. We do not want to be in an area that has any amount of freezing rain in it. As the raindrops continue their plunge through the below-freezing air, they may all freeze into sleet. So back to our decision on what to do. We've just encountered the area of sleet. What about that thought that it's best to climb? Well, that is not a good idea because it will take us into the mix and eventually into the freezing rain area. That is precisely where we do not want to be. Yes, there is warm air above, but the likelihood that we will reach that warm air is not good if we are trying to climb through freezing rain. What if we do nothing, maintain our course and altitude, and hope that we will pass through the area of sleet? But by the sloping nature of the frontal activity that produces these conditions, we're most likely going to fly into the area of mix soon, to be followed by the area of freezing rain. So back to our decision on what to do. We have just entered the area of sleet. Clearly the best option is to execute a 180-degree turn and fly back to the area where there was no sleet. Then we should make an informed decision on what to do next. For much more aviation safety information, please visit vectorsforsafety.com and join our mailing list to receive our free and also advertising-free newsletter. So there you have it. On behalf of Avemco Insurance, myself, and vectorsforsafety.com, thanks for watching. And please always remember, fly like your life depends on it.